Hey, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of brotherhood. I am half of your distinguished host, Eric Diamond.
I'm the other half of your distinguished host, and probably the back half, Jason Van Dyke.
Only this week. Next week, I get to be the back half.
Right. There's
So,
trading.
so we weren't on last week, mainly because I was on vacation. We took a week and went up to Canada. Went to Niagara
Our
Falls.
nice neighbors to the north.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Canadians, love you guys. It's everything about it, except Toronto. Like,
You didn't like Toronto?
I like Toronto. I like this. Like, the people were really nice. The city was nice, except the traffic was terrible.
Yeah, okay.
Construction everywhere, and not just construction like road construction, like I would expect, but like building construction, which
Yeah.
means that like all the streets were kind of crazy.
Hmm.
The fact that in Toronto you're really not allowed to do Airbnb,
Hmm.
so everybody does it on the down low, which causes all kinds of issues and
Yeah,
problems.
right.
And the food was okay. I mean, the food in like I have to tell you, like the restaurants that we went to in the area around Niagara was really good, really really good. Like
Hmm.
simple, nothing super fancy, but really really good. And
Hmm.
one place that you recommended to me was this place called the Old Angel Inn, which what all right. So the story is that in the War of 1812, the Americans came over, took over Niagara. The American commander, ordered the town to be burnt, which they did, and it was pretty horrible. Like, a lot of people were left homeless, like right on the verge of winter. It was pretty horrible. And then the guy who was the colonel, the American colonel, was basically thrown under the bus. So everybody disavowed him. He died in disgrace. It was not one of our best moments in history. And in fact, there was a lot of the people who did the burning were actually Canadians. They were just like they were Canadian
Hmm.
volunteers for the U.S. So it was kind of a war, and so but because they're Canadian up there, they commemorate it. And what's really interesting is, so like when you're in Niagara, right? So, like, for people who don't know, like, Niagara Falls is this enormous waterfall, right? And on one bank, I know, like, I
If you
have to tell
don't know,
if you don't know,
Niagara Falls,
yeah, yeah,
it's a big waterfall.
well, we have a lot of people in, like, places like India, and they might not
Okay.
know, but all right. So anyway, but what's interesting is that the like, one side of the fall is American, and the other side of the falls is Canadian. And there was this Fort Niagara, which is like right on this like little peninsula, and it's this beautiful, huge fort that was built by, I think, Rene LaSalle in like I don't know, 48 or something, 1660 or 70 or something, in the 1600s. And
Hmm.
it got taken over by the British in the French and Indian War, and then the Americans got it in the Revolutionary War. And across the way, and so we were on the Canadian side, and, like, I mean, you could swim across the Niagara River and get to the American side. You could, it's very easy to see. I have pictures and stuff. And and uh and and so we went to Fort George, which is the British fort
Hmm.
on the British side of Niagara. And that was like, it was interesting, but it was tiny, and it was like, wooden stockades and stuff like that. And basically what happened in 1814 was that the Americans just overran the place, just took it over completely. It wasn't very much of a fort. And what really struck me was the lack of resources that the British, I mean, it was really clear that the War of 1812 was one of those, like, oops moments for the Brits, because they were really busy fighting Napoleon and throwing all of their resources into that war and into Europe, and not really paying that much attention to their American colonies. So they kind of left the Canadians, near as I can tell, kind of high and dry, right? And so that's probably what saved us, because again, they're still the most powerful military in the world, and they probably could have, if they really sort of coordinated, they could probably crush it the United States at that point like a grape, and I think that was probably what led to the war, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is a really interesting area.
Yeah.
Niagara Falls itself is terrible.
No, I liked it.
It's a 20-minute trip at best. You go down, you look at the falls. They're beautiful. It's a natural beauty, but at the same time, how long can you stare at it? It's like the Grand Canyon. Hey, look, it's a big hole. All right, moving on. That was great. But Niagara on the Lake is a really cool little area.
Yeah.
Great wineries around it. Really, really cool area. And the Old Angel Inn is delicious food. Delicious food. There's also a good cheese place there too that we went into.
Mm-hmm.
A little cheese shop that had like charcuterie and stuff.
Yeah,
it was delicious.
Yeah, there's good cheese. There's good ice. A lot of ice cream there. A lot of gelato and artisan stuff, which is it's good. The one thing that Jason told me about was Old Angel Inn makes a really amazing shepherd's pie, and I can tell you it's
best I've ever had.
It's good enough for Jehovah.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
it is. It absolutely is. It's it's a Guinness shepherd's pie, and so it's got like a black gravy.
Yeah. It was really quite good.
I will dream about that pie. It's amazing.
Yeah, but all in all, Canada was good. One thing that was interesting in the Fort George historical stuff was a mention of Niagara Lodge Number 2.
Hey, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and so I did not actually get to find the lodge building. I looked a little bit for it, but that's pretty cool. I mean, it was like and basically what they said about it was that a lot of the British officers were also Masons. A lot of the American officers were Masons, and when the American officers took the British officers prisoner and vice versa, they treated their Masonic brothers better than probably they deserved.
Yep, absolutely. Only one lashing a day, not 3.
But yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that nicely leads us into our topic for the evening. Which is traveling, and traveling Masonically, as it were. This topic came to me because I was thinking about it. It's the summertime. A lot of lodges are dark these days, and this is the time when families go with traveling. And a lot of guys end up as they're traveling, trying to visit other lodges or maybe grand lodges, things like that, Masonic sites, as it were. So that we just talk a little bit about that. I think the first thing I think we should get out of the way is how you do it.
You just basically show up, right? And
no.
Your overalls and your shorts and your flip flops.
Right.
Yeah,
you could do that. There's a better way.
Write the Grand Master. We could write the letter to the Grand Master.
I was thinking text, maybe call. But I think that the first thing that we should talk about is that you got to be a Master Mason to travel, unless if you're an EA or a fellow craft, you've got to be traveling with someone that can vouch for you. And even then, there are lodges that'll just say, "Yeah, no, you can't come, not yet." So you really need to be a Master Mason to travel.
What if it's your son? Like if your son is the EA, do they?
Sure. Again, you've sat in lodge with him. You can vouch for him. Some lodges will say yes. Some will say, sorry.
Outside.
Yeah, wait outside. We'll hang out with you. We'll give you a tour of the lodge room and stuff, but you can't sit in the meeting, which is fine. You just have to expect that as an EA and a fellow craft. You're not a full member yet. When you're a full member, the world is your oyster. So once you're a Master Mason, then if you're traveling inside the United States, if you're a member of a U.S. Grand Lodge, recognized Grand Lodge, mainstream Grand Lodge, it's pretty easy, and you don't need traveling papers or anything like that. You need your dues card, your valid dues card, And you have to be willing to answer some questions from a senior deacon or a junior warden or a secretary or whomever they send out to examine you.
Like, what is your quest?
Right.
What is your favorite color?
Yeah. Right. Those are the questions.
Are you a turtle?
What? Yeah. So those are the things that you can expect in the United States. Now, if you're traveling from the United States and you're traveling overseas, the requirements are different, and vice versa. If you guys are overseas and you're coming here to the United States and you want to visit a lodge, if you want to sit in a lodge, that's where things get a little bit more complicated. What's interesting is that in my position, I get a lot of requests. A lot of times it's from our website. We'll get hey, I'm going to be in town. What lodges can I go to? Well, you've completely skipped the entire page of the website that's called calendar, that shows all the lodge meetings, when they meet and how they meet. But whatever. But they've skipped a step, and Grand Lodges get really persnickety about it, especially the United Grand Lodge of England. They really dislike it when members don't follow protocol in their communication with other Grand Lodges or their Grand Lodge. So what you have to do is you have to actually go to your lodge secretary, tell them, hey, I'm going to be traveling in the United States. I want to go to a lodge. Can you have the Grand Lodge contact their Grand Lodge and let them know I'm coming, and also give me a letter of introduction that I might take it along with me. And it goes through a bunch of Masonic red tape, and essentially it's a bunch of emails going back and forth saying, hey, I'm coming here, blah, blah, blah. And their Grand Lodge will issue a letter of introduction that they carry along, and it's signed by the Grand Secretary, basically saying, hey, you're okay, let him in the lodge. And you take that with your dues card, and again, be willing to answer some questions, should they have them for you. And that's really it. That can take a little bit longer to get those letters of introduction. Can take a week or two, depending on what Grand Lodge you're in. But that's what happens when you're traveling. And then you should visit the Grand Lodge's website. Find the meetings that you want to go to. Find out from your Grand Lodge, is it okay to contact the lodge or the Grand Lodge directly after the little protocol has been followed. 9 times out of 10 they'll say, yeah, just go ahead. They know that you're coming. They know, we're all aware now. Now you can talk to them directly. And it's a good idea to be able to do that, so that you can tell the secretary, hey, I'm visiting Mason and I'm thinking about coming, and the secretary can say, oh, great. We're having a festive board that day. It's $50 a head. And make sure to bring your tuxedo. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it, I guess, Eric. And am I missing anything?
Well, so I have a couple questions. I'm actually a very bad person to ask this.
Yeah, my mustache, by the way, right now is, for whatever reason, going straight up my nose and making me itch.
That's fantastic.
Horribly. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm actually a bad person to ask about this, because the way that I normally travel, I travel on business. Mm-hmm. And so typically, like, I know maybe the week before I'm going that I'm
Sure.
going. So there's no way that I can go through all that rigmarole
Sure.
to visit a lodge. So as a result, I seldom do. I mean, normally when I travel Masonically, it's because someone's asked me to speak somewhere. And
Right.
so I'll show up, but all that work has been done for me. Right. So I think, like, a few years ago, I visited Templum Fidelis Lodge in Bath, Ontario. And that was lovely, lovely time, lovely guys. But they had smoothed all that over for me and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
let me say this: you can actually, it is your right as Master Mason to just show up at any lodge you want to show up at and ask for entrance. there's honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, is it the most polite thing in the world to do? No, you know, um, but you certainly can.
Hmm.
You can just show up, and no one's going to look askance at you for that. Um, but they might be a little bit put out at first. Um, but if you go about it the right way, everyone's more than happy to accommodate. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
I mean, so I guess the first thing, like, if one were to have a checklist, right? You're going to be traveling. I think the only thing I've got on my docket right now is we're gonna be going to uh, England and France in the fall.
Hmm.
I'm the grand representative to the Grand Lodge Nationale de Francais.
Okay.
I'm studying French, so I can at least make the attempt to greet
Hmm.
them in French.
The purple crayon is on the table.
Yeah, exactly.
Good job.
Uh, and uh, so I actually have to contact my Grand Lodge just to say, okay, what's the protocol? It might be different when you're a Grand Rep. I don't know. You know.
So, all right. Well, actually, that's actually a really, really good point. It is. When you're a member of the Grand Lodge, and often that means Grand Representative, or it could mean you're a Grand Lodge officer, appointed or elected. It is different. You really have to let them know that you're in town, and that you mean to make a visit. Um, if you are a Grand Lodge officer and you just show up at somebody's door going, "Hi, I'm a Grand Lodge officer from the District of Columbia," people are like, oh my god," like, and they freak out because they don't know how to properly receive you and give you the respect that's due and things like that, and so people freak out about that stuff. And then when Grand Lodges find out about it, they get really ticked because you ought to be letting them know. It's a courtesy.
Hmm.
And if you're a Grand Lodge officer, courtesies are really important, and they're mandatory. so 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 if you're a Grand Lodge officer, there you have to go through those extra steps. You can't just show up. It's really rude to do that. And so yeah, you will have to you'll have to make some phone calls, send some emails.
Okay, things to do on Monday.
There
Make
you
a phone
go.
call. Yeah, no, and not only that, but this is funny, and I don't mean to like call out the Grand Lodge of Illinois in any way, but I have a life membership that's instead of a jewel, a master's jewel. It's our lodge tradition that the outgoing master receives a life membership to the lodge.
Yeah,
So,
pretty
so I
awesome.
have, yeah, which is awesome. And so when you become a life member in Illinois, they give you this lovely plastic card that's
Mhm.
and that's like your permanent dues card.
Mhm.
Mine has disintegrated. Like over, because I carry it in my wallet all the time. Like I don't know why I
Yeah,
do that. I
sure.
just do.
Right,
Like
sure.
I'm proud,
Well, yeah, yeah.
and I've been trying for like the better part of a year to get a new one. For some reason,
It's
it
time.
just
It's time.
it's just it's for some like they keep sending it and it keeps getting lost or it keeps getting like I don't know what is going on, but
That's
there's
great.
somebody intercepting my mail.
Yeah,
Like,
that's right.
oh, Grand Lodge of Illinois,
Yeah.
aha,
Woohoo.
dues card, burn it.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. That's good.
so I'll have to figure that out before I go.
Yeah.
But
Uh, and I think for the rest of this, I would love to talk about traveling and the experience of traveling and having travelers come and visit us, because I always find it really fun. I think like any travel, you learn so much about a culture and people, um, by exposing yourself to that stuff, and new ideas. And I love it. I love having visitors come here, and I love visiting places when I'm traveling. Um, it's really cool to see masonry practice differently, at different places where you go. I mean, I've sat in a tiny lodge, in North Carolina, Nashville, North Carolina, actually, that doubles as it's the home. The lodge building is the home of I think three Blue Lodges, the York Rite, the Scottish Rite, and and I want to say they
Eastern
do.
Star?
No, I was going to say Demolay. I mean, it's an all-in-one package, and it's a tiny little building. It is absolutely the most humble thing in the world. And double irony is that it's in Asheville, like literally like a mile away from the largest private home in existence. And so like it's hilarious, and it's a really cool place filled with really good Masons, and I had a heck of a good time there. And they just practice Masonry differently. It's a different thing for them. And the guys travel from all over the place to get there, which is really cool too. And here my Masonry is, a metro ride away.
Right.
And those guys are driving an hour, each way, to go to lodge. It's a huge commitment for them. So, that was really cool to experience. I haven't done it overseas yet. I was actually supposed to, when I worked for the Scottish Rite, I went to London, and it was my first time overseas when I'd gone. And so I neglected to factor in the time difference, and that I was basically losing a day of my life because of the red eye that we took. And so I was scheduled to go and have lunch with the Grand Commander of Scotland and Wales, of England and Wales. That's what it is, England and Wales, and hang out at the Scottish Rite Supreme Council in London. And I literally slept through it. Just gone.
Wow.
Completely stood them up. They thought I was dead. They were freaking out, calling like back to the Supreme Council here. They're like, "Oh my God, he's nowhere and he won't answer his emails and blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I slept. Sorry." I was not prepared.
Are you like persona non grata there now?
No. But I did. God bless them. They're nice, but they are a serious bunch. And so, like, I told their Grand Chancellor at the next meeting of our Supreme Council that they came to, I had cornered him, and I apologized again to him. I mean, I freaked out while I was there and apologized all over the place. And it turned out that I couldn't. There wasn't another time for me to go there. They were basically closing down. It was like the last day of them being in the office before they all went on summer vacation. And so, like, I apologized as much as I possibly could, offered, blood atonement, everything. And they were nice. They were very gracious about it. But when he was in town, I told the Grand Chancellor, I was like, "Hey, listen, feel free to stand me up at any point during this week while you're here. I'm fine with that. I completely deserve that." And he didn't even barely give me a chuckle. It was the coldest smile I've ever gotten in my life. Like, "You've gone too far, boy."
Yeah.
God bless him.
The Van Dyke wit doesn't necessarily translate across oceans.
Doesn't translate. No, it certainly doesn't. So God bless him. But that was my only shot at it, unfortunately. Trying to think. When we were in Paris and when we were in Europe, last couple times that we've been there, nothing. But it's vacation, and I work. I work for.
You work for Masonry, right? Yeah.
So it's generally the last thing I want to do while I'm on vacation.
But here's the thing that brings an interesting thing, because when I went to Paris for the first time, again, it was one of those, like, you're going in a week and a half, and I didn't really have the opportunity to to really kind of pave the way. The other thing too is that when you're doing business travel, you don't check bags. Check bags are like are
because you're going to lose them.
Yeah, and because I'm a large guy, like for me to put clothes in a carry-on bag is difficult, right?
Yeah,
so to have like a full-on tux with all the accoutrement and stuff like that, it's hard. It's difficult to carry that and all the stuff that I need to carry for my business trip.
Right.
That's a lot of times that's as much of a problem as, sort of the protocol issue is just making sure that I've got the right kind of suit and the right,
Yep.
right kind of
Absolutely.
stuff. But when I did go to Paris, I did manage to visit I tried to visit the GLNF. They were not there at that time when I was there, and I think they're in this place in Paris called La Défense, which is sort of on the western side of the city, and it's kind of like this area that is mostly skyscrapers and like big hotels and things like that. So it's a lot of the corporate headquarters in Paris are there because there's not a lot of like my guess is that either there wasn't a whole lot there, but it's west of the Arc de Triomphe, and so that's where, like, have you ever seen that arch, the La Défense arch, which is like a big modernist,
Sure.
so that's kind of where it is. La Défense is not the sort of place where I think you really go unless you got someone to see there.
Right.
It's just, there's not a whole lot there, like in terms
Right.
of, the stuff that one would want to see when
Sure.
one was in Paris. But I did get to go to the Grand Orient of France's museum. So, don't, a lot of places where you'll travel, there are, dominant Grand Lodges that are just they're not recognized by our flavor of Masonry. That shouldn't necessarily put you off. I mean, you're not allowed to visit their lodge, but if they've got a museum, if, like, they're still people.
Yeah.
And they're still
Absolutely.
Masons. They're just not, we're forbidden for conversing on the secrets of Masonry with someone who is not recognized or clandestine or whatever. That doesn't mean we can't acknowledge them as people. We can't go have a beer with them. We can't go talk to them and stuff like that. And I found that they have an amazing museum in Paris, the Grand Orient. Just some incredible artifacts, some beautiful, beautiful art. Just like if you're into sort of Masonic material culture, things like jewels and Masonic watches and paintings and textiles and stuff like that. They have just an amazing, and also they have an amazing history. And one of the things that I up until that trip, to me, the Grand Orient was this sort of like, it was almost like the Masonic boogeyman. Like, oh, we don't talk about the Grand Orient, that kind of thing. Oh, they abandoned God years ago. We don't talk, like it was always that sort of like, we don't do that. We don't do that kind of thing. But once I got there, I learned a couple things that really opened my eyes. One of them was that, in World War II, when you had all these sort of clandestine lodges and like the stalags and the prison camps, they were almost all of them were Grand Orient lodges. They were either Grand Orient of Belgium or Grand Orient of France. None of them were lodges that we would have recognized. And part of the reason for that is that the Nazis, when they went into Germany, when the Nazis took over, Masonry was pretty high up on their list of organizations that were verboten. They kind of regarded Masonry as a Jewish plot, a Zionist plot. So what they did was they passed a law basically saying that as of, I think it was something like September 30th, 1934, this is pretty soon after they took over. If you were still a Mason after that date, you could never, ever get a government job, a state job. You could never be a member of the Nazi Party. And that, like, if you were like a school principal or a member of government or something like that, you needed that kind of affiliation in order to keep your job. So there were a lot of people who were, party members who weren't necessarily like avowed Nazis. They were just doing it because, that's what you did in order to, keep your county clerk position or whatever. And so what they did was basically all the Masons, almost to a man, that were part of the lodges that we would recognize, disavowed their membership, on the grounds that, Masonry teaches us that we have to obey the laws of the land. And since the laws of the land said you can't, be a Mason, they resigned their membership. And then what the Nazis did is they took over the lodge buildings. They confiscated all the gear, all the equipment and stuff, like furniture and everything like that. And they made a movie in France called, I think it was called La Masonry, or it's a 19, I think it was made in 30, I want to say 38, but it's a really interesting film, anti-Masonic film, that is sort of like an expose, but it's not really. But what they did was they sort of showed the evils of Masonry, and then kind of revealed the secret rituals, which are not, Right. I mean, we would recognize them as something sort of quasi-Masonic. Right. But what was interesting about it was that they actually had the real furniture and chairs and rods and stuff, because they had taken it from the German lodges. Yeah. And what they did was they created an organization called, I think it was the Germanic Knight Templar Temple or something like that. And so all those lodges basically converted into this sort of quasi-Nazi Masonry that no one really ever joined. So
it was their Teutonic myth of the Superman kind of crap. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's sort of like, what the knight, if the Knights of Columbus was a Catholic response to Masonry, this thing was sort of the Nazi response. But it was one of those things like, why in the world would I want to join that? Like I could just join the Nazi party or be part of the SS or something like, like why would I do that? Right. So it never really went anywhere. It was a way to hold the property of the Freemasons. So all of those lodges where the guys were like, meeting in secret, making their own, altars out of, cakes of soap and what have you. All of those were French lodges. They were French style lodges.
That's interesting.
And yeah, that was a real like, oh, did not know that. So that whole the myth of the what was it? The forget-me-not, right? That's apocryphal anyway.
Correct.
It's a nice idea, but it never really, really happened.
No.
But the guys who would have been wearing that secret stuff, those were the French. And those lodges, and in fact, there were lodges that were commissioned under dispensation, from like while in exile, that worked degrees and stuff during the war.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah,
and they've got all that stuff in that museum.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. See, and I think that speaks to you don't have to go to a meeting, to travel Masonically. Yeah. You can go to a museum like that. If you're here in DC, you can go to the House of the Temple. They got a cool museum. You can go to the George Washington Masonic Memorial, cool museum. There are things to see. There are really cool things to see. I didn't go when we were in Williamsburg. I really wanted to go and see the Williamsburg Lodge.
It's great.
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to do that. But is that lodge open? Because it's right there downtown, isn't it?
Yeah, so the Williamsburg Lodge. It's Williamsburg number 6. Their lodge building is on the colonial property, and I'm told it's one of 2 buildings that is privately owned. I think the other one might be a church.
Okay, sure.
But all the other buildings in the colonial property, and I didn't know this until I visited, all the other buildings in the colonial property are owned by the trust. So John D. Rockefeller in the 1930s set up the Williamsburg Trust, and he funded a lot of that initial restoration. And so all those buildings are now owned by that trust.
That's cool.
And so people live in those buildings, right? But they, like for example, if you want to drive your car into your garage is underground. Like all the cable and electrical service and everything. It's all underground. So you know, you can go into one of those private homes and in the historical area, and you have, you know, you have electricity, you have running water and stuff, but all that stuff's hidden, right? And
That's so cool.
It's incredibly expensive because it's, you know, you can't.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Right.
You can't have a power meter on the outside of your house, right? Because right. So you have to it has to all be underground. So
the oldie meter.
Yeah. But what's interesting about the Williamsburg Lodge building is that they have a special ordinance where the rule is if the lights are on in the lodge building, you're allowed to park on the street, which you can't do anywhere else. Like if you want to park in the Colonial Williamsburg area, you have to park. They have these special tourist parking lots in the outskirts of the area.
Right.
You can park on the dirt road in front of the lodge while they're meeting, right? So that was pretty amazing. And then the stuff they have in the lodge room is completely amazing too, right? So they're like, oh yeah, there's James Madison's, or no, it was James Monroe. James Monroe, like when he was a freshman at William and Mary, they came and you know, he became a Mason in Williamsburg number 6, and you know, there's his apron, there's his past master tool, and you're like,
so
you know.
So do they talk about the fact that at William and Mary, they kicked off all the Greek letter fraternities for a while? For actually a large chunk of history at William and Mary, they outlawed Greek letter fraternities, and so guys still wanted to have a fraternal experience while they were in college, and the Masons there, the local Masons, being the smart, industrious men they were, went, funny, looking for fraternity? Would you like to have the original? And swooped in and took all those guys, and for years that was basically the de facto fraternity, and there was only one on the campus of William and Mary, and they allowed it to operate because it wasn't just for students. So they had found this fun little gray area where they could exist, and they just had tons of students join as basically their college fraternity. And then it got to the point where it was too big, and the college went, well, we're losing money off of this because no one's paying us anything for this. Bring back the Greeks. And so they brought back the Greeks because they could get a cut of the action. But,
well, the other thing that I learned when I was there was that so William and Mary has the only colonial studies PhD program in the world, like in America, right? So it's American colonial studies. So all the guys and women who work in the colonial area, like, you know, the gunsmith and the wood, you know, the cabinet maker and the printing guy, right? They're all postdocs, right? These are all PhDs, right? Who've written their dissertation on some aspect of colonial life. Like the shoemaker has a PhD and he's doing his postdoc work, and here's how they really made shoes, right? And so like, what's really cool is, so when I visited them, it's still one of the best Masonic travel stories. I visited them on a night when they were just doing rehearsals. So they didn't actually open. I mean, they opened, but it was a pro forma open. It wasn't a stated meeting or anything.
Right.
And they were just doing like, you know, I think they were getting ready for a degree. And, you know, the guy who plays George Washington was a member of I think he was like the junior warden at the time. Right. The guy who was the gunsmith was the senior deacon. Right. And they came like right from work. So they're all dressed in their colonial duds, and, you know, like,
that's super cool.
Because it was not a stated meeting night, so they didn't have to dress up or anything. It was still kind of casual. But it was so cool to like talk to these guys and be like, you know, because I remember because I'd been in the so the guy who was the gunsmith, also in Williamsburg, the place where they made the guns and maintained them was also the guy who would cast things in brass and copper, and so like basically everything but the blacksmith, right? So all the metal work that was done, unless it was like, so there was a guy who like a silversmith, right, and a pewtersmith, and they did like the fine stuff. Right. Everything else, like if you needed like a brass candle holder or a hook to put something on, you went to this guy who was also the gunsmith, and then the blacksmith was the blacksmith, right? And so I like earlier that day, I was hanging out in the gunsmith area and like listening to him lecture about like, sand casting and how they did all, and then I go to the lodge and like, there he is, and I'm like, wow,
that's cool.
Right. So that's
super cool.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice. See, and that's exactly, that's what we're talking about. That's the opportunity that you get when you're traveling, is that you stumble on all these cool, weird little things.
Yeah.
So just quick on that, just a couple comments that we've gotten, which by the way, thanks guys for everybody, for commenting. Jeff Day commented that hello from Morgan, just watched a lot of episodes, first time watching live. That's nice.
Hey, welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. God, I hope you're not disappointed. Nathan Tweedy, believe that a former brother direct produced the film. He's talking about the Nazi propaganda film. He said that I feel Steve Harrison did a Masonic minute on it. Could be wrong. Very interesting. We'll have to.
I think you can watch the movie. I think it's on YouTube. In its entirety, like subtitled. It's worth a watch. Just
Yeah.
Like,
the internet.
Put it this way: don't watch it if you're trying to learn anything about Masonry. You will not learn damn thing about Masonry. But if you're a Mason already and you want to see like how anti-Masonry works, it's a really good study in how to do that.
Again, the internet has everything. Jeff Woolsey got to see a modified French EA in Milwaukee recently at a German-speaking lodge. Said the variation was cool to see. That's super cool. A French EA in a German-speaking lodge. Interesting. That's very, very interesting.
Are there? So there are lodges. So I'm pretty sure in Illinois everything's worked in English. Although I remember there was either a dispensation or something. There's a lodge that's mostly made up of Filipino guys. Like there's a lodge in Chicago. And I think they might have gotten a dispensation to run a degree in
Tagalog.
I don't think they do it in Tagalog. I think they did it in Spanish, but I don't know about that. But it's pretty much an English only show.
Cool.
But in DC, different story.
We got a lot of foreign language lodges. We got German, French, Italian, Turkish, Farsi? I think Farsi.
Wow.
Yeah, I think.
That's Persian for those who don't know.
That's right. And then I only know how to say one thing in Farsi, and it's really dirty. What else do we have? Oh, and Spanish. Obviously Spanish. Good Lord. How could you not have Spanish? A couple Spanish lodges, actually. So, and in fact, the Grand Secretary just put the finishing touches, and probably when I get in tomorrow or Tuesday, we'll have the boxes that will have shown up from the printer, has just done an exhaustive translation of our ritual into Spanish and has printed it in its own little cool ritual books. So now the Spanish-speaking lodges can have their own ritual books.
That's interesting. So do they do all the lodges that work in a different language have their own monitor?
No. And so that's the thing, right? Is that because the only official ritual is DC ritual, and that has its own monitor. But these lodges are given dispensation to run the either DC ritual or emulation ritual in a foreign language. So, like for example, the France Lodge actually runs on emulation ritual. So it uses French emulation. Really, actually, very, very cool stuff. But they have a permanent dispensation to do that. So this is actually the first official foreign language monitor that we've published. It's super, super cool, and it's all it's all in cipher, which is really cool too. So it's nifty. Woolsey says that it's the only German-speaking lodge left in Wisconsin, which is crazy to me that there's only one in Wisconsin. Crazy to me. He said permanent dispensation for liquid refreshments from the Grand Lodge. See, they're...
You mean like protein shakes?
Sure. Just better protein than most are used to. That's awesome. That's really, really cool. I like that. That's lots of fun. And Charles Miller says, not in Pennsylvania. We go to the local German club afterwards for fellowship, which is great. I would kill to see Pennsylvania ritual in a different language. But yeah. I have only read Pennsylvania Ritual, not been to a Pennsylvania Lodge, which is a damned shame. A damn shame. Yeah, but you've got an excuse. My excuse, I have none. I mean, it's a 2-hour drive to Philly, and haven't done it. Kills me. I'm trying to think. Where would you like to go if you had like your dream lodge meeting? What would it be? Where?
Well, there's a couple places.
What's your bucket list?
So my Masonic bucket list is, I would love to go visit a lodge in Israel.
Oh, nice. It's a good one. Yeah. Okay.
Like I have a monitor, a fellowcraft catechism, I think, and degree, from 1932 in Hebrew. So it was still during the British occupation, like when the British were running Palestine before the founding of the Grand Lodge of Israel. And right. That's pretty cool. So I would love to hear, to hear ritual in Hebrew. That to me would be like really, cool. Really cool. Okay. There's a lodge in Japan, in Tokyo, that is I've seen pictures of the inside of the room, and it's beautiful. It's the only modern lodge, like modern. When I say modern, I mean like modernist. That I've ever seen. I mean, most lodges sort of, they're done in a traditional American style or an Egyptian style or sort of Old English, and it's all like woody and paneled and everything like that. This is like super modern, and it's beautiful.
It is. It's really cool.
And so I want to, do that.
My friend Paul, who is living out there, is a member in one of the lodges that meets there, and that building has the room that they planned Pearl Harbor in. It has a huge map table, and it's actually where they planned. It's Yamamoto planned the Pearl Harbor attacks on that table. Yeah, and you can actually still go in there. It's super, super cool. The modern building is actually wrapped around an older building. It's very, very cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then I think I would like to go to a lodge in India.
That would be super interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Like it's interesting. We've been promoting these broadcasts on Facebook, and one of the things, we've gotten a lot of new listeners who are Indian. So I wasn't, basically what I said is I wanted anybody who speaks English, I want them to, get exposed to this. Which before I was only targeting people in England, United States, Canada, right. And now I'm like, I don't care. Well, we're going to go global. But India would be really interesting. Like just to see what a lodge room looked like. And
really cool.
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really, really cool. Boy, that might be that might be a winner for me. I would love to see that. My number one bucket list is a Swedish lodge. Anything operating under Swedish Rite. I am dying to go to a Swedish Rite meeting because they're just the coolest. They're so interesting. They're so fascinating to me because everything is so different that it's just what's amazing is I can't believe that everybody recognizes them, and they're so
Yeah.
vastly different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm dying to do that. And because I'm a KCCH in the Scottish Rite, I am entitled to go to their.
It's like the 9th degree. Is it?
I think the 8th.
Okay.
I think the 9th is 33rd. Is the 9th degree. But I think it goes all the way up because I think that I can't remember how this goes. One of them, maybe it's the 12th. I always think it's the 12th. The 12th is an honorary degree in the Swedish Rite. And I think the 11th might also be honorary. And it's like the 12th is only the Grand Master. It's just crazy. All that stuff is just crazy. And it's like the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Sweden. Not like the Grand Lodge of like Iceland, who is he's a Grand Master, but he's not the Grand Master in their system. It's super cool. I dig the hell out of that.
Yeah.
stuff.
So interesting that you bring that up because I recently got into a Facebook tussle.
Uh-huh.
So for those who don't know, that is my weakness. I'm working on it. I'm getting
That's right.
better and
That's
better.
right.
But like when I see injustice on the internet, I feel compelled to swoop in and be the voice of data and critical thinking and things like that. And it often gets me into trouble. So blanket apology. But there was this one thread about it was about the Knights Templar and whether it bothered anybody that it was Christian only. And I sort of told this story about how when I first became a Mason, it bothered the hell out of me because I'm Jewish and I, while I have friends who are Jewish and I have friends who are Muslim and also members of the commandery. Right. There's this little thing in the commandery that says that, if called upon to draw my sword, I will give preference to the Christian religion. And some people make their peace with that. I'm cool with it. I don't judge or anything like that. I just felt like for me to like make any sort of preferential statement of faith to me is not Freemasonry to me.
Right.
Right.
Sure. Right.
All right. So, and again, it's not it bothered.
It's your weakness.
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't my weakness is like getting into fights over this stuff. When I first started as a Mason, the thing that really bothered me was the Masonic Rosicrucians, because
right.
So I had asked a learned friend of mine who here around in Masonry studies Kabbalah, and they were like, "Oh, well, the Rosicrucians do that." I'm like, "Okay, great. Can I join?" No. What? Why? Because you're not Christian, but they study Kabbalah. Well, yes, but and so that really bothered me. The commandery, I can. Look, yeah. I have no need to if I want a sword, I have a sword. I kind of need
it's a bunch of idiots with a sword
marching around with a Muppet on their head. It's fine. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
That bothered me because I study Kabbalah pretty seriously, and I'm always interested in how other groups, Hermetic, Christian, other and I was interested in that, and that was sort of closed off to me. So that. Again, this is a decade ago. I'm upset about it, but it was part of like how the show evolved, right? How the show came to be is because I had heard that there was a group in New York called the Sons of the Maccabees or something like that, or it was the Order of Judah Maccabee.
Sure, right.
And that was sort of like the commandery for Jews, and it went for a few years, and I think it died out about maybe 10 or 12 years ago.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to revive that, or I'm going to make my own version. And I wrote a degree called the Sons of Light, and it was sort of modeled off of the knights. So in Judaism, there's no chivalric tradition, right? Sure. Troops were on the ground. We didn't have mounted, if you had mounted troops, they were in chariots. They weren't, so there's no knightly tradition, But what they did have during the Bar Kokhba rebellion was this thing called the Abirim, which the word Abirim actually comes from the same root as the word Abith, right?
Yeah,
Abi means father, but it also means master, right? So like, and it's also the Semitic root of the word Abu. So like if you hear someone named Abu something, it means father of something or master of something. And so the Abirim were the masters of battle. And so they were these guys who had to prove themselves, and they became this sort of like asymmetrical fighting force. And so I did a whole degree. I had insignia, I had logos, I had everything like that. And then I thought, what am I doing? A, does the world need another Masonic order? Right. No.
Fair.
Right.
Fair.
B, what was I going to like? It's only going to be for Jews. Like I'm guilty of the same thing that everybody else is doing.
That's a good point.
No,
right.
no.
Right.
So I just put it aside. I said, there's got to be a better way for me to serve Masonry. And that's when I started thinking about doing a podcast. Right. So that kind of led into X-Oriente.
Well, I think that, which thank God for. But I have to say that I think it would be really funny. I think it would be really funny to just run that degree. I think you should do it. I think you should start it for a short time, and then the festive board is Chinese food.
It should be. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite movies is
run it on Christmas.
There's a great there's a great movie called My Favorite Year. Like almost nobody saw it. It was made in the 80s. It stars Mark Lynn-Baker, I think, and Peter O'Toole, right? And he plays he basically plays himself, but sort of a more alcoholic version of himself. Right. And Mark Lynn-Baker is this like nebbishy Jewishy kid working for NBC, and so remember the movie Get Him to the Greek? Yeah, it's the same movie. Get Him to the Greek was a remake of My Favorite Year, but My Favorite Year takes place in the 1950s. And so he is, he's going to be a guest on the show that Mark Lynn-Baker works on, and he's basically got to keep him sober. Right. And there's this great line, my favorite line of the movie, where he says, "Jews know two things: suffering and where to find the best Chinese food."
That's pretty great.
Right?
That is pretty great. Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to Jeff's comment, so the Swedish Rite is Christian only. However, if you are a Mason and Jewish or Muslim or something, you can visit. They'll physically let you in the room, that you just can't join a Swedish lodge. And, lest you think that that's a terrible thing, there are other lodges in Scandinavian countries that are not the Swedish Rite. Like you can join the Grand Lodge of Denmark, which isn't the Swedish Rite, and they're just like a normal lodge that, they're just like a regular whatever. No?
Go for the Swedish. They're so much cooler.
Well, if you're not, I'm saying if you're Christian, go for the Swedish.
You could still visit.
Yeah.
I'd still go visit.
But I'm just saying, like if you're one of the 4 or 5 Swedish Jews,
right? At most, can you imagine that though? A Jewish Viking, I'd pay to see that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there were.
Right, I would pay to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be cool though. I really want to go see Swedish Rite. They'd be the top of my bucket list, Masonic bucket list. I love yours. I love your idea of an Indian lodge. I think that would be really cool. Probably think Japan would be fun too. That would be really cool. I really want to go. I would really like to do one go to a lodge meeting in Australia, and not because they do things differently or anything like that. It's just because I'd want to hang out with the Australians afterwards and drink lots of beer, and that would be the fun part for me. Would be the people. I would really like to do that.
Yeah, no, I would second that. Actually, one of the very first fans of the show was he's a guy by the name of Matt English. Matt, if you're listening, shout out to you, who worked in Karguli. This is where he wrote from. So Karguli is it's a town in like the middle of the country in like the outback, right? And it's where most of the gold in the world comes from. Like they mine most of the gold out of that place. And so Karguli is kind of a company. It's like a one industry kind of town, but they have lodges there. And I think if I remember correctly, he was looking to get out. Like I think he was looking to move to Sydney or Melbourne or something like that. But yeah, Australian lodge would be cool. I mean, here's the thing. Like there's so many, like one of the lodges I really want to visit is Hawaii. Like, so there's a lodge called La Loge de Progrès. I can't remember the number, but it's the Honolulu Lodge where, King David Kalakaua.
Oh, yeah, right.
The last king of Hawaii was a Mason. And so what's interesting about Kalakaua is that Kalakaua is the only example of American royalty.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
And that's absolutely right. And was given the 33rd degree by Pike.
Yes, he was given the 33rd degree by Pike. And my lodge has a connection with Loge de Progrès because when Kalakaua came to the United States, he went on a cross-country train tour. So he arrived in San Francisco and went on a train tour and made a special trip to stop in Chicago to attend Oriental Lodge, which is my mother lodge.
That's super cool.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. And so they were met by Long John Wentworth. So Wentworth was one of the founders of the Republican Party. He was the mayor of Chicago, and he was a super colorful character. So Wentworth would drink like about a bottle of brandy a day, and he gave what poet laureate Carl Sandburg called the most terrifying stump speech in history. When he was rip-roaring drunk and he yelled at the crowd, "You can vote for me or you can go to hell." And he was elected by a landslide. He also fired the Chicago Police Department.
Nice.
And crime went down. They were fired for 72 hours.
Hashtag only Chicago.
Right. They wanted to go on strike, fantastic. And he said, screw that, and he fired the Chicago Police Department and crime went down.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Only in Chicago.
Yep,
but he was the one who greeted the king. And, and I actually, cool. In this room, I was gifted by, there was a guy who was a former Illinois Mason who moved to Hawaii, joined that lodge. He was a past master, I think, of that lodge. Gave me a facsimile of both David Kalakaua's petition and his father, King Kamehameha's petition.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so I actually, it's in his handwriting. And so they didn't have pre-printed petitions, right? So you would actually write the form, right? So it said name, and then there's a line, David Kalakaua, occupation. That's awesome. Head of state.
Oh, okay.
Address, the palace.
That's awesome. That is amazing. That is fan-damn-tastic.
Like,
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, why do you want to be a Mason? It's a really cool thing. But anyway, they have a really amazing lodge. They have some really primo real estate in Honolulu, and it's just it's my understanding is cool. It's an amazing place. So that would be someplace I would love to.
Yeah. Also, it's in Hawaii. We're free for speaking engagements if you're out there listening to us right now. Totally.
Yeah. We will speak anywhere. The only thing you pay our transportation costs and our lodging, and we'll go anywhere and speak to anybody about anything.
Damn toot.
But and that kind of there's so many places like South. I'd love to go to a lodge in South America.
South Africa.
South Africa
would be amazing.
Yeah,
South Africa.
Yeah. And here's the
super cool.
And to kind of put a bow on all of this, right? this to me is one of the primary benefits of becoming a Mason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Is that you can go pretty much anywhere in the world, except for a few places you probably don't want to go to anyway. But you can go almost anywhere in the world, and there's a network of people that you can hook into. There are people who are eager to meet you, hang out with you, show you a good time, show you their city. You can visit a lodge. You can see how they work. And what's cool about that is that even though there's differences in how they do ritual, you will recognize what you see there. There's enough commonality that you'll feel comfortable. And this is always something that, like, when you're Jewish, you have the same kind of thing, right? Like, I can go to any synagogue anywhere in the world, and they're all speaking the same language. It's all in Hebrew. It's all they're doing the same prayers. They're doing the same. It's kind of cool, right? It's kind of like you can go anywhere and be comfortable and know that you're gonna what you're gonna get. Yeah, Masonry in many respects is better because you don't have any of that crazy kosher stuff, and it's not religious. It's actually fellowship, and that's all to me a lot more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is to me. I mean, that's probably one of the top things that when people say, "Why should I become a Mason?" It's because you have this network, a global, worldwide network of brothers, and Oriental Lodge. My lodge is we're the oldest lodge in Chicago, so we're kind of blessed in the sense that a lot of times when people come to Chicago, they come to visit our lodge if they can. They've heard about it. We have a reputation, which is nice. And so we've had, I remember we once had the Grand Master of Kenya, came and visited, who was cool. Indian.
Yeah. That's really cool.
We had, we've had members who are French and English, and it's just an amazing, wonderful thing when you have people who come. Like, there's a guy who my brother Rafe, who comes from Puerto Rico. He is a furniture salesman in Puerto Rico, and he comes to Chicago every June for the Neocon Furniture Convention, which is held in the Merchandise Mart. And we only see him once a year. He comes in for that thing. He visits our lodge, and he's practically an honorary member, right? I mean, it's great.
It's really funny, and from Grand Lodge perspective, it's really cool. A couple of years ago now, we had the Grand Master of India stop by. He was just in town, and he stopped by. He wanted to drop off some pins. And he was really cool and just wanted to, shake the hand of the Grand Master if he was around. He wasn't. So he got the Grand Secretary. But he was super interesting because he was the first Sikh Grand Master.
Really?
Yeah. And he was awesome. I mean, and full Sikh, because Sikhs are big. They're a large people. Much larger than your average Indian, and so he was just this just towering man, with the big beard and everything, and he was so cool. One of the nicest guys I've ever met, and just thought big thoughts about Masonry. And it was just super, super cool to talk to him. So I mean, I can't tell you how. The other thing that you should do is to see the flip side of this coin, right? And what you're talking about is be welcoming to others. Always bring those people into the lodge, because you'd be fascinated by their stories and the things that they can tell you about their lives. It's super cool to do that. So
yeah, Sikhs are amazing. In fact, I'm watching a show on Netflix now called Sacred Games.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I have not.
So it's basically it's like a cop show, and he plays like a not a ne'er-do-well, but he's sort of a bit of a screwball. Doesn't really fit in because the rest of the police department is corrupt, and he doesn't want to play that game. But he's a Sikh,
Oh,
what's
cool.
Yeah, and what's cool is that like he's a Sikh, but they don't really make a big thing about it. It's just he's a Sikh, It's just
Sure.
awesome, yeah. So, before we go, have you seen Lodge 49 yet?
No.
Dude.
I keep meaning to do it. I know. I keep meaning to do it, and I keep forgetting. I got distracted this weekend because I watched the entirety of Disenchanted.
Okay, you're free. Did you notice the Masonic apron?
I did, and I died laughing. The Masonic apron, and first of all, it was hilarious. The first 2 episodes started off a little slow, but it gets cranking, and it's beautiful. It's so good.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, this is Matt Groening's. So he did The Simpsons, and then he did Futurama, and now he's sort of tackling,
Fantasy.
medieval and fantasy,
medieval
and
fantasy.
yeah, like it's sort of Game of Thronesy, and
It's hilarious.
it's really funny. It's really funny. But there's like a couple of evil geniuses who are kind of moving the plot along, and one of them has like square glasses and like a Masonic apron.
It is pretty great. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
So that's why I.
But yeah,
you
definitely it's definitely one of those shows. It's getting better, and it's really interesting to see the similarities and differences in the order of the links.
Yeah.
And their ritual and stuff, and masonry. There's a lot of similarities.
Cool.
There's a lot of differences, but it's.
All right, I swear I'll watch it by next week.
All right, because we'll do a review. We'll do a proper.
All right, that works. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fair. How are they hour-long episodes?
Yeah.
Oh, screwed. All right.
No, you can. You know what? You can watch them on the AMC app.
Gotta download another damned app. I'm just saying.
It's on demand. God, you're such a
app fatigue.
Make an exception.
Download it. You got to download an app for everything these days.
Make an exception.
I'm in. All right, I'll do it.
All right,
100%.
So that wraps up our show. Next week we're going to talk about being a gentleman in the 21st century. I think if that all pans out. I want to thank everybody who showed up. Jeff, Jason, Stacy, Alan, and housekeeping. Thank you. Extreme thanks to our executive producers who support the show. If you'd like to become an executive producer, please navigate your way to our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/X-Oriente and make a pledge. The funds that we get help pay for the bandwidth that we use here, the software, the hardware, and improvements. So right now we've got our actually we should be in Spotify any minute now. So we've registered. You'll be able to get us through Spotify. That we're just going through the vetting process now, and that's made possible by our executive producers. You can download X-Oriente wherever you get fine podcasts, or through our own app, which is available for iOS on the App Store. Just look up X-Oriente. And we are in development for the Android version as well. And those actually have a continuing cost because we have to pay there's a development cost that we have to develop for, but then there's a continuing cost because those things have to be uploaded and we have to do it in a kind of a continuous basis. So there's an additional like bandwidth cost for the app. So our executive producers really help that out. Drop us a line, let us know what you think of the show. We're at xoriente@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on our Facebook page. You can get better quality versions of all of our shows on our YouTube channel. You can check that out. And What else? What am I missing, Jason?
I don't think you're missing anything.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks very much. Please tune in next week and every week, and subscribe, and leave a if you like what you hear, leave a positive review on or leave any sort of review really, but we like positive reviews. Positives are better.
Right.
Leave a review at on the App Store, wherever you get podcasts, because they do help people find the show. And that's about it. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, and we'll
Have
see
a
you
good
next
night.
time.
See you next time.